You can start now.
So, hello everyone. Welcome to the workshop Understanding Ventilators in the Post-COVID 19 World. My name is Arun Nayan and I'll be taking you through this workshop. Before we begin, allow me to briefly introduce myself. I am an R&D engineer from Inali Assistive Tech, a India-based startup working in the field of prosthetics and assistive devices. Inali Assistive Tech is a part of the 3D Experience Lab Global Accelerator Program of Dassault Systems. The 3D Experience Lab accelerates startups and projects that are solving tough problems for a better planet and society. The lab provides us access to Dassault Systems cloud solutions like CATIA, Simulia, Innovia, and so on, along with technical mentoring. Anali Assistive Tech was started in the year 2019 and we entered the lab program in the same year. We have been working with 3D Experience Lab Pune with Mr. Suhas Pratipal Gungate, the lab manager at 3D Experience Lab Pune. He has helped us develop new and more advanced assistive devices. He was also deeply involved in the development of Nadi RMBS, a ventilation system developed by us. In the beginning of March 2020, the 3D Experience Lab opened a collaborative platform for makers, engineers, technical, and medical experts to come together to share and collaborate around designs of personal protective equipment and ventilators so that they could be made available for anyone who needed them across the world. It is called the Open COVID-19 Community. You should definitely check it out when you get a chance and participate in the discussions there. We'll put the link in the description or the comments of this workshop. So let's just go through what the workshop outcomes are. By the end of this workshop, the participants will understand the importance of ventilators in treating COVID-19 patients, understand the different types of ventilators there are, the different modes of ventilation, and the working of a ventilator. So let us first understand the disease that we are trying to fight here, the COVID-19. So the pathogen that is responsible for COVID-19 is the SARS-CoV-2. This is one of the 7 types of the coronavirus group that is available in the world. The Middle East respiratory syndrome and the sudden acute respiratory syndrome, that is MERS and SARS, come from the same family. COVID-19 causes respiratory tract infections, which in turn cause inflammations in the throat, windpipe, and lungs. Its transmission is either through person-to-person contact or person-to-surface-to-person contact. The symptoms for COVID-19 are usually breathlessness, fatigue, and this can be usually associated with pneumonia and acute respiratory distress syndrome. Now, I would like you to particularly pay attention to ARDS because that is one of the major things that we will be discussing further on. So, acute respiratory distress syndrome is a life-threatening situation for any patient affected by it. There is a significant decrease in lung compliance due to a fluid filling up in the alveoli. It causes hypoxia, which means there's a low concentration of O2 in your blood and your body. Early diagnosis and treatment is very important for ARDS. Mechanical ventilation is used to support breathing under ARDS. Now, I have a short video that I would like to show everyone, which will give us some idea about the COVID-19 and how it affects the human body. Just a second. Yeah, good. So ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, is a condition that causes fluid to build up in your lungs, so oxygen can't get into your organs. As you've seen in the video, the alveoli were filled up with fluid, which made it difficult for it to expand, and distension was very difficult for it. Fluid leaks from the small blood vessels and collects in tiny air sacs in your lungs, so they can't fill with your enough air. Because of this, your blood can't pick up the oxygen it needs to carry to the rest of your body. Organs such as your kidney or brain might not work that way, the way they should, or might shut down. Low compliance indicates a stiff lung and means extra work is required to bring in a normal volume of air. This occurs as the lung is, in this case, becomes fibrotic, loses their distensibility, that means their ability to extend, and becomes stiffer. So before I begin this part of uh, the presentation, I would like to have some questions if you have any regarding ARDS, because that is a very important topic. So Pradnya, could you help me out here?
Yes, so I have already posted in the chat box that if any question or doubts regarding this, so please welcome and interrupt us. So let's see if any response we got. Otherwise, you can continue with your session.
Okay. So any doubts regarding ARDS that you have as of now? Was the video that I had shown you informative?
Yes, it is fine, informative, and I will recommend you, like, if you have any link of that video, you can post in the chat box.
Yeah, I'll surely do that. Okay.
So if any
So
question I found in a chat box, I will interrupt you and ask you in between, okay?
all right. So I'll just continue for now.
Sure.
So regarding ventilators, there are few clinical terminologies that are very important that you need to get yourself acquainted with. So I'll help you in that regard. I have a few terms that I think would be very helpful further on that for you to understand the whole system. The first term is tidal volume. So this basically signifies the amount of volume that is consumed by in a normal breathing. That means in a amount of volume that is displaced in normal inhalation and exhalation. If you see the graph that I have provided here, this basically shows you that at the 30 ml per kg mark, that is your basic average line. And beyond that is inhalation, and below that is exhalation. So anything that any increase that goes through this curve is an inhalation, and anything that goes towards a direct downward direction is exhalation. And if you see there's a larger curve or bend here, that is a forced inhalation. When you sometimes take a deep breath, that is when you go through this inspiratory reserve volume. Otherwise, you're always breathing in the tidal volume, and that is the amount that you normally breathe. Now, doctors usually consider tidal volume as from a rule of thumb of 6 ml per kg based on your ideal body weight. Beyond that, these are if you want me to explain you the other terms that are present in the graph, we can get back to it. Respiratory rate. This is basically a person's, the number of breaths that he takes per minute. So a normal respiration rate for an adult at rest is around 12 to 20 breaths per minute. Peak inspiratory pressure is the highest level of pressure that is experienced by your alveoli or the lungs during inhalation. In mechanical ventilation, the number reflects a positive number in centimeters of water pressure. That is the unit of pressure that is commonly used in mechanical ventilation and in any documentation that you see, either centimeter H2O or kilopascal. So FiO2, fraction of inspired oxygen. Fraction of inspired oxygen is the molar or volumetric fraction of oxygen in the inhaled gas. Medical patients experiencing difficulty breathing are provided with oxygen enriched air, which means higher than atmospheric FiO2. Natural air includes 21% oxygen, which is equivalent to FiO2 of 0.21. Normally, as of through post COVID-19, we have seen anesthetists and intensivists administrating a FiO2 of at, at least zero point 0.5, zero point 0.7, and even as far as zero point 0.9. So that is the kind of condition that we are facing as of now, where the patient is experiencing extreme hypoxia and requires very high percentages of oxygen. So positive end expiratory pressure, PEEP. So this is the pressure level that is the bare minimum maintained inside your lungs. If PEEP is not maintained in your lungs, then if ARDS is occurring in a patient, that means fluid has built up. And if you're trying to breathe normally, that means when you're exhaling, your alveoli are trying to close up. And if there is fluid in them, there is a high chance that they can collapse and you will lose your function. That is what pneumonia and ARDS is basically. ARDS, it basically means that you lose your capacity to breathe normally throughout your whole lungs, whereas pneumonia means you lose a part of it, maybe a lobe of your lung. I ratio. I ratio, the inspiratory and expiratory ratio refers to the ratio of inspiratory time and expiratory time. That means if you're breathing normally, you usually have an expiratory time that is twice as long as your inspiratory time. That means if you breathe for a second, you inhale for a second, then you breathe out for 2 seconds. That is the ratio that is maintained, and this is a setting that is usually used in ventilators. Plateau pressure. Plateau pressure is the pressure applied to small airways and alveoli during positive pressure mechanical ventilation. I think the next graph would be more helpful in this case to help you understand what plateau pressure is. So this is a respiration cycle, as you can see, and this is basically characterized by two parts, the inspiratory cycle and the expiratory cycle, which are further divided into inspiratory flow time and inspiratory pause, expiratory flow time and expiratory pause. The peak pressure that is attained is during inspiration, when you are forcibly entering air into your lungs. That is where the work of breathing lies, in inspiration. The peak pressure is the point that is the maximum pressure that can be attained by your lungs. But this is during movement of air. That means this also has resistance from airways, that means your thorax. If you have any particular equipment or filters in your ventilator, that would also add to your resistive pressure. But once you stop your breathing, that is in the inspiratory pause, the pressure starts dropping because there is no movement of air. And that's when you see the plateau pressure, which is this small dip of a plain line at the top. This is the plateau pressure that comes in once the motion of air has stopped. And this actually is the true value of pressure available or generated in the alveoli. So this is a very good marker for the pressure that is inside your lungs and what causes harm to your lungs if exceeded, rather than peak pressure. And expiratory flow time and expiratory pause are basically, once you start exhaling, that's where you start losing pressure, and that's where elastic pressure starts decreasing. Now I would like to get into some of the what I would say is the harms that can come in mechanical ventilation if not properly used. That one of first of it is atelectasis. This is, as I said, the partial or complete collapse of an entire lung or area of the lobe. It occurs when tiny air sacs like the alveoli within the lung become deflated or possibly filled with alveolar fluid. What usually happens is this fluid makes it very hard for it to come back to its original form, which means that you are actually losing your ability to take in that volume. Intensivists usually use various maneuvers like prone ventilation and PEEP, which is very important to recruit these alveoli back into your breathing system. The second is barotrauma. Barotrauma is the physical damage to body tissues caused by the difference in pressure between gas inside the body and the surrounding external environment. Pulmonary barotrauma, which is what we are discussing here, from invasive mechanical ventilation, refers to alveolar rupture due to elevated alveolar pressure. So if you start actually adding more volume than a person's lungs can take in, that will cause the alveoli to rupture, and he will experience permanent damage of the lungs, which is also very harmful for the patient. So that these are some very important nuances of the mechanical ventilator that I think should be very important to be told to everyone. Lastly, lung compliance. Now, all the previous terms that I explained to you come into a culmination here, which is a reference point for a person's lung condition. Lung compliance or pulmonary compliance is a measure of the lung's ability to stretch and expand. In clinical practice, it is separated into two different measures, static compliance and dynamic compliance. Static compliance is the change in volume for any given applied pressure, whereas dynamic compliance is compliance of the lung at any given time during actual movement of air. So as I had explained in the graph earlier, the difference between peak pressure and plateau pressure, that also plays a major part in dynamic and static compliance. Because when during the movement of air, the resistance that is felt from the airways also plays a part in the compliance of the lungs. That's why dynamic compliance and static compliance are two very different variables. But considering that we have to understand the condition of the patient rather than the resistance that can come also from the breathing circuit. Suppose you add filters into it. That's why static compliance can be a better marker for the patient's conditions. This is a graph to let you understand how static compliance affects a patient. Uh, right. Right, I actually forgot to give you the formula for it. So static compliance is the ratio between the tidal volume and the difference between plateau pressure and peak. That is the maximum pressure that is achieved in the lungs and the minimum pressure. The dynamic compliance at the same time considers the movement of the air and has the peak pressure in its ratio. So according to compliance, if you say that if you are delivering a particular amount of volume into an individual, as you can see in this graph, suppose for the same amount of volume, if you have a lower lung compliance, that means that you are going to get a higher pressure increase, which can be harmful for the patient. That's why lower lung compliance can be dangerous in terms of barotrauma. This is what is usually seen in ARDS. Now let's get into mechanical ventilation. So mechanical ventilation is the treatment to help a person breathe when they find it difficult or unable to breathe on their own. This can be caused due to pneumonia or ARDS or emphysema. There are multiple medical conditions where you require a mechanical ventilator. But the modes that are required, which I'll explain further on, are much more important to understand how these people are treated with using a ventilator. The mechanical ventilation can be subdivided into invasive and non-invasive ventilation. Invasive ventilation usually has intubation or tracheotomy involved in it, where a person uses an endotracheal tube that goes through the throat of a person to bypass its upper respiratory tract. And whereas non-invasive ventilators usually use a mask that can be actually used at home, where a lot of people face respiratory difficulties, that can be sleep apnea or some permanent chronic conditions. Types of ventilation can be further divided into negative pressure ventilators and positive pressure ventilators. Negative pressure ventilators apply suction to the outside of your chest, which causes a negative pressure to increase inside and force you to breathe, which makes the chest rise and expand. The ventilation is controlled by adjusting the length of inspiration and the amount of suction, which means the flow and the IE ratio. The chest shell must be of the correct size for proper fit to prevent leaks. This is one of the major drawbacks of negative pressure ventilation because of its cluttery equipment, which causes it to leak a lot. This was actually used during the time of polio. This is a very primitive technology as of now. Nobody uses negative pressure ventilators as of now. So iron lung, if you get a chance, you can Google it. It's a huge piece of equipment where your whole body is to be contained inside the. It it actually looks like a coffin, where your whole body is contained inside the iron lung, and only your head sticks out. So that is why the positive pressure ventilators were developed. This complete works in completely opposite way from the negative pressure ventilators. And where humans also use negative pressure ventilation in our normal breathing, positive pressure ventilators force a positive pressure inside your lungs. So the amount of air that is delivered depends on the amount of pressure applied and how long it is applied. It has a few side effects where it can increase the pressure, intrathoracic pressure and intracranial pressure. And there it also affects your heart condition where your cardiac output is decreased. The exhalation is passive and begins when the pressure is terminated and the exhalation valve is opened. This means that no actual work is done during exhalation. It only allows you to simply breathe and allows that pathway to open. So the two types of positive pressure ventilators are the CPAP and BiPAP. That is the continuous positive airway pressure, which delivers constant and steady air pressure and allows the patient to breathe. Which this is only a pressure support for the person that is trying to breathe. But in cases where there is huge lung fatigue and the person is completely unable to breathe and has no motivation, this can be due to some uh, psychotrauma, right? Apologies, I forgot the word. So this can be some trauma to the head that can cause no motivation to the patient, or it can be due to the inability of its lungs to breathe properly. So bi-level positive airway pressure delivers air with different pressures for inhalation and exhalation. This is where the PIP, plateau pressure, and PEEP come into play. Where PEEP is very important to recruit those alveoli back into the workforce for the lungs. Classification based on flow generation. So this is a classification of the types of ventilators that are available. This is basically in the form of how the flow for inspiration is generated. There are numerous methods that you can even see in the market for various models. So I'll just go through them one by one. The first is pneumatic, where the regulation of supply gas pressure, that is pipe gas from the walls installed in hospital, or the cylinder gas pressure is controlled using valves from an external reservoir. Its flow rates can be up to 200 liters per minute, and its design uses less battery power. It depends on a stable supply of pressurized gas with a minimum of 120 to 150 liters per minute flow rate and a minimum pressure of around 200 kilopascals. A turbine where a compressor is used to produce pressurized gas flow and requires blending of oxygen for its FiO2 can have potentially higher flow rates up to 240 liters per minute. It can compensate for large amounts of leakages in the breathing circuit. It also requires less gas compared to the pneumatic because there is no direct supply that you are using, but a compressor is generating the air. It still requires compressed oxygen supply for its blending. Bellow-based ventilators, where a flexible gas reservoir is compressed to produce inspiratory flow either by a secondary gas circuit or a motorized lever or gravity. This is capable of precisely controlling the composition of gas mixture. This is suitable for low gas supplies, which does not require 200 kilopascals of supply. That is not means this can be used where equipment is uncommonly found and where there is a severe lack of proper equipment. This is a bit more complex and has more moving parts, which also means that it has greater points of failure. It is also unable to compensate for large leaks, and therefore it is unsuitable for neonatal ventilations, where for ventilation for babies. There's another arrangement, that is the piston cylinder arrangement, where a rigid chamber, the volume of which is mechanically manipulated to generate inspiratory flow. This has much better volume control compared to all the other three types. Excuse me. It has increased gas economy and quieter operation. It is unable to compensate for leak. These are a few modes of ventilations. I just wanted to let you know that there are multiple, even more modes of ventilation beyond this, where there are hybrid types of ventilation which use a combination of all these operations. For our scope of discussion, I have taken the first three, that is the volume controlled ventilation, the pressure controlled ventilation, and the assist controlled ventilation. But from my understanding, the other modes are also very important in recovery of the patient, in considering the pre-existing conditions of the patient and tackling them. So suppose a patient is trying to breathe. The classical modes of ventilation, that is the volume and pressure control ventilation, will not be able to help the patient in breathing. On the other hand, they will actually try to force the patient to breathe in terms of the machine's timings rather than their own efforts. This can cause a problem later on. I'll explain this further. Now let's get on to the three types that I was talking about. So the first mode of ventilation, that is the volume controlled mode of ventilation. Volume controlled ventilation defines the volume administered to the patient. That means your tidal volume is used as a control variable. This means that during the operation of the ventilator, a caregiver usually set a particular amount of tidal volume that is absolutely required to be delivered to the patient. As I told you earlier during my explanation, that a rule of thumb is usually between 5 to 8 ml per kg based on your body weight. So the airway pressure resulting from the delivery of volume comes from the compliance of the lungs. The volume control mode does ensure that the patient will receive a specific tidal volume, and the pressure limit ensures that there are no peak pressures that could harm the lungs. So that is what works here. Basically, you are required to put in a set amount of volume that is to be delivered and a pressure limit where to protect the lungs from barotrauma. If you look at the graphs that I have here, you can see for the volume against time graph, this is very consistent in its curve, and the flow is a straight line. That means the in volume control mode, you have a constant flow rate that is provided. Whereas in the pressure graph, you have a sloping action here, and this is inconsistent. This is due to the difference in compliance that comes in the regular operation, which means that it does not really care about what pressure it is reaching as long as volume is being delivered. But if it goes beyond a particular point, then it will immediately start its expiration phase. For pressure controlled ventilation, it determines the pressure which is to be administered to the patient's lungs. Now, this is a very important mode of ventilation in terms of COVID-19, because pressure is because of a low lung compliance. A lot of people experience barotrauma if pressure controlled ventilation is not used, which is very important for COVID-19 patients. So the inspiratory pressure is set in the ventilator, which is the maximum pressure that the ventilator is allowed to administer to the patient. And the tidal volume is determined by the compliance of the lungs and the applied pressure. The maximum pressure in the lungs remains constant, whereas the volume keeps varying. So if you see the graph of flow, there's a sudden peak that it reaches, and then it starts slowly decreasing back at the end of inspiration. Whereas in the pressure graph, you can see that there's a sudden rise of pressure, after which it remains constant throughout the breath. Whereas for volume delivery, it keeps changing. Otherwise, the pressure is remaining consistent. So you can actually see the difference between volume controlled and pressure controlled mode if you look at the characteristics of it. So in pressure control mode, you have constant pressure lines, whereas in volume control mode, you have constant flow lines and you have consistent volume lines. Whereas in pressure control mode, you have consistent pressure lines. So this information is actually important, quite important to intensivists because it helps them understand where the patient is facing a problem in terms of its pressure. The third mode of ventilation is the assist control ventilation. This is also a volume cycle mode of ventilation. That means it is a variant of volume controlled mode of ventilation, but it also accommodates for the patient's effort of breathing. So it works by setting a fixed tidal volume that the ventilator will deliver at set intervals of time when the patient initiates a breath. So the pressure sensor in the ventilator will actually detect a trigger from the patient when it's trying to breathe. If you look at the graph of pressure, the first curve has an initial dip towards negative pressure, which is the patient triggered breath. This is used as a trigger to deliver the entire volume that is set into the ventilator. And this actually coordinates the machine and the patient with each other and their breathing. So the volume, tidal volume delivered by the ventilator in assist control will always be the same, regardless of compliance, peak or plateau pressures in the lungs. So this is the Inali rapidly manufactured ventilation system. This is what we have developed from our end for our efforts into COVID-19. Now, before I start discussing this further on, I understand that I have gone through quite a lot of information, and if anyone has any questions regarding this, I would love to have them. Hello?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So, are
So
there
yeah,
any questions?
I think no, because you describe really, really well. But something in the chat, can you like read it or?
I'm sorry, actually, I'm quite new to Zoom. Could you help me out here? Where can I find the chat? Right. Can you discuss
Okay.
using one
Yeah,
ventilator
yeah.
with multiple? Right. Okay. So Dean Rose has a question of, can you discuss using one ventilator with multiple patients? Has this been successful in areas of need? Right. So you're talking about a splitter valve, which is an interesting idea, but it is not useful in my opinion. So a patient's needs of compliance keep changing. They are very dynamic in terms of its recovery of the patient. If you apply one ventilator to multiple patients, then they will be the same setting will be applied to all of them, which is never the case. Maybe they will be stabilized for a few hours, maybe 1 or 2 hours, and once their compliances start deviating from each other, then you will start facing the real issues, and then actually you'll have to set up individual ventilators to each of them. So that's why I don't think that this can be a very successful idea. You'll actually have to have an individual ventilator for each of them because their requirements can change throughout the duration of their recovery. So does that cover it? Okay, okay, Dean, you're welcome. So should I continue with what we have developed and try and discuss that further on?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So this is the ventilator that we have manufactured. Now, as I remember, this had taken quite some time for us. I mean, the amount of hours that we spent throughout the night working on this was something else. But we all understand the urgency that is available that we all feel throughout the world right now. So this was developed actually in, I think, around 1.5 months. That's what the time that took us. But of course, there is a huge room of improvement for this as well. So considering what I have explained to you earlier regarding the classification, so for based on flow generation, this will come under a bellow-based ventilator. So this, which uses a manual resuscitator bag squeezer. So that means your umbu bag that you use, that you may have heard about, which is used for manual resuscitation, is used in this ventilator as well. This is the primary reason for using this is the ambu bags or resuscitator bags are commonly available and can be found easily. And the other reason is due to the emergency medical devices that were deployed earlier, and the government FDA ruling that came in, that any device that had earlier FDA approval can be repurposed for building new devices. So that is what prompted the use of ambu bags, in my opinion. So the modes of ventilation that we were able to implement was the volume controlled ventilation and assist controlled ventilation. So these are the specifications of a ventilator. The, the peak inspiratory pressure limit that we apply into for the patient, with this can be in the range of 15 to 40 centimeters of H2O in the increments of 2 centimeters H2O. There is a mechanical fail-safe valve that opens at 60 centimeters of H2O. This is integrated into the breather bag. The positive end expiratory pressure is maintained in the breathing system during expiration. It has a range of 5 to 20 centimeters of H2O adjustable in 5 centimeter H2O increments. So this is a mechanical valve as well, but it also has information that needs to be fed into the system, which will help it actually improve. The patient breathing system must remain pressurized to at least the peak level settings at all times. This is what I'm talking about, where the ventilator that we have developed will actually sense the pressure readings and ensure that the peak level does not drop, because that is also a very important factor in terms of recovery. So, as I mentioned earlier, in recruitment maneuvers, where an intensivist tries to recover the collapsed alveoli, so PEEP is one of the major factors where the tidal volume that is delivered to the patient is decreased and the PEEP is increased, where the alveoli are meant to be kept a little bit open. A pressure is maintained throughout the lungs. So this actually helps open up the collapsed alveoli. So if you start losing PEEP throughout, if you're doing a maneuver in the course of a week, and if you start losing your maintained pressure in the lungs in the middle of the procedure, then this will actually be very devastating for the person in terms of its recovery. So the IE ratio, the portion of each breathing cycle that is spent breathing in comparison to breathing out. 1:2 is the standard, but we have a range of 1:3 to 2:1. Now 1:1 and 2:1 are not commonly used, and if they are used, they are actually called an inverse ratio ventilation. This is actually used if there is a very high increase in airway pressure, so it helps to decrease that. So respiratory rate, the number of breathing cycles every minute that we have. So that has a range of 10 to 30 BPM in increments of 2. The tidal volume can be adjusted from 300 ml to 600 ml. So this is our ventilator and the components that are involved in it. So as you can see, there is a marking everywhere from the breather bag to the stepper motor. We have used a rack and pinion assembly for the compression of the bag, an LCD display to navigate through the screen and change those settings that I previously talked about, an SMPS to connect it through any of your AC ports that are available. The pressure sensor is used to actually measure the pressure. Right. So we have used a stepper motor for the movement of our rack and for position control of the system. So there's a stepper motor driver. For the pressure sensor, to increase the resolution of the readings of pressure, we have used a 24-bit analog to digital converter. We have used a buzzer for our alarm and a DC-DC buck converter to step down the DC voltage for some particular components. And an Arduino Uno is used as the controlling unit. So before I go through the top calculations, I would like to go through the method we have used for the two modes of ventilation. That is the volume control mode and pressure control mode. So the pressure sensor is an integrate part of the ventilator that we have developed, where throughout the cycle, for every step that it takes, the pressure readings are taken. That means for every increment of the motor, the pressure will increase. I'll just show you a flowchart that I developed. Um,
I think
so
your
this
screen
is,
sharing is stopped. Okay, now
right.
it's visible.
Yeah, I was just changing the screens. So this is a flowchart of our operation. So I'll just go through this to this with you. So throughout our operation of the ventilator, this is the flow of the control, where the system begins its operation. It first reads the mode that is set into it. If the mode is BCV, then parameters like tidal volume, PIP, the trigger, and PEEP are read. And if not, I'm sorry, there's a mistake here that trigger should not be in the volume control mode. So only assist control mode has a trigger. So once you read these parameters, the motor and the pressing compression mechanism starts returning to home. After that, the BPM and IE ratio are measured, are read, and the motor's speed is calculated. This is where the inspiration begins. So there's an increment in the motor step, and with each increment, it checks if it has reached the tidal volume. I'll explain this further on. But once, if it has not reached the tidal volume, then it checks the pressure. If it has reached the pressure limit of the peak pressure limit, if that is not there, then it keeps doing this in a cyclical manner till it reaches the tidal volume where it reverses directions. And once it's reverse directions, the same things happen where it reaches home again. And if it's an ACB, then it's reach the pressure again for a trigger. So let's get back to how all of this is done in terms of the calculations. 1 second. So the torque calculation of the motor. So this is a very important part for motor selection. The other factors that are involved are the type of control that you require for the for the motor, whether the control loop is an open or closed loop, whether you are getting feedback from it, and the noise that is incorporated in the motor. So how you can reduce that, and that helps you decide which type of motor you actually want to use in your system. So we landed on a stepper motor because it uses open loop position control, but and with this which was primarily available to us, to be very honest. During the lockdown, we did not have a lot of equipment available to us, so we actually had to make do with whatever was available to develop what we had. So that's why you will soon further understand that the ventilator we developed does have a few deficiencies, but that can also always be improved. So going to the torque calculation, the inertia of the system is to be considered. That is the mass of the reciprocating system, that is our rack and pinion. So for calculation of the torque, the moving mass, which would include our rack and the pressure pad that we have here, and the limit switch that is incorporated, this will be contributing to the moving mass. So the force that is applied on the rack can be calculated using this mass, the coefficient of friction of the guide mechanism, the maximum acceleration of the system. This can be calculated using the extreme settings that you have decided upon in your system. So for our specifications, the maximum acceleration can come from the highest rate of BPM and the minimum IE ratio. So that would be 600 ml, 1:3, and for a BPM of 30. So that will give you the maximum acceleration for any system. That depends on what you're developing. And FE is the pressing force that is applied by the rack onto the bag. Now for our considerations, what I have done is I had considered a maximum pressure that can be generated by inside the bag, which cannot be more than 60 centimeters of water, because I previously mentioned that we have a mechanical wall, a pop-off wall, which will open up once it exceeds 60 centimeters of water. So that is the maximum pressure that I consider, and I calculated how much area is in contact with the pressing pad of the rack mechanism. So this area with the pressure gave me the force, that is the pressing force that is required for the mechanism. So with these values, I calculated the force that the rack experiences, and from the radius of the pinion, I calculated the torque that would be required by the motor. So for my calculations, it came about 8.9, but it can differ from the mechanism that you are using, from the guide mechanism that you are using, the friction involved in it. A lot of factors like this can change. For volume mapping. So for volume mapping, this is a rather rudimentary method that we had used, because a flow sensor is the ideal that can be used. But due to the lockdown and the lack of resources that we had, this is the method that we employed. We map the tidal volume for the breathing bag by measuring the number of strokes required to fill an elastic reservoir bag of known volume. So the volume of the reservoir bag was measured by filling water and measuring the volume of water required to completely fill up the bag. So as I already mentioned, that this is only a rule of thumb and can be and is inaccurate, to be very honest. But this is what we had employed in our system. Now we are currently in works with to integrate a flow sensor to it and improve upon it. So through our testing that we had done for this mapping, we landed on a relation of tidal volume and number of steps of the motor. That how many increments of the stepper motor does it require to reach a particular tidal volume. So for every 10 steps, for every 13 steps, it reaches a 10 ml tidal volume. So this relation was used by us to control the number of steps of the stepper motor from the input given of the tidal volume. So this is the speed calculation we did. Now, since we only use volume control mode, the acceleration was always, it was a constant flow system. That is, the velocity does not increase and the acceleration always remains zero, except from the moments of inertia. So once we have the number of steps the stepper motor needed to achieve, we have to specify the step speed of the motor. So this
Hi Arun, sorry to interrupting you. Yeah, so few participants have another session. So if you speed up the presentation, then it will be like we will have some time for the question and answer session.
Sure, that can be
So how
done.
many?
Actually,
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
finished up actually. This is the interface in the alarms that I have to cover.
Okay, no
So
problem.
I'll just cover the speed calculations and I'll cover the alarms because the interface can be understood from the previous information I had given. Is that fine?
Yeah, sure. Because
Okay.
at 6:30 the symposium going to start.
Yeah, I
So only,
understand.
yeah. So yeah. Okay
I
then.
actually lost track of time actually. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Right. So for the speed calculation, let us take an example. If we have to, these are the following settings for on a machine. That is a tidal volume of 600 ml, a BPM of 20, and an IE ratio of 1:2. Then the time of breath, that is the time required for each breath, is 3 seconds because we have a BPM of 20. That is for 60 seconds in a minute and 20 breaths per minute. So 3 seconds for a breath, and we have a IE ratio of 1:2. That means that can be divided into 1 second for inspiration and 2 seconds for expiration. So the number of steps is converted from the uh, previous relation that we had generated, that is 1.3. So we calculated 780 steps that is required for completing the whole tidal volume cycle. So this is the speed we required to cover that distance or number of steps. That is, for inspiration, we had 780 steps per second, and for expiration, we have 390 steps per second. I think this is a fairly straightforward calculation that can be done. This is the interface that we had. So the controls that were displayed in the screen were the pressure reading, the mode BCV, the IE ratio, the BPM, the tidal volume, PIP, the peak inspiratory pressure that is, and the positive end expiratory pressure. Additionally, in the assist control mode, there is a trigger setting as well. These are the controls that we had, the menu next and menu previous to travel through the settings, and the plus and minus to increment the values. The LED signified the power, alarm, the BPM and trigger. So power is used to indicate that power has reached the system. Alarm for any alarm that sounds off, which accompanies a buzzer sound. A BPM indicates the end of each respiratory cycle, and trigger, which only works in ACV mode, indicates a breath that has been triggered. So this is another important slide that I wanted to cover, which is the alarms in the system. We had 3 alarms in our ventilator, which is the exceeded PIP, that if during the inspiration phase, the pressure in the lungs increases beyond the limit set by the caregiver, then the ventilator will immediately start the expiration phase and sound an alarm. In positive end expiratory pressure, if there is a drop during the expiration phase below the below the peak level, then the ventilator will sound an alarm. For disconnection, if this pressure does not increase above peak level for a consecutive few cycles, then the system sounds a disconnection alarm, which indicates a fault in the breathing circuit, which can also mean a leak or a disconnection from the ventilator. So this is all I had for you today. Uh, I would be very happy to answer any questions that you may have or have a good discussion about it.
Yes, so Arun, from my side, like it was a really great experience to hear from you about so much detailing, and it's good. But like the slides and the presentation is very descriptive and understandable. So nice. So I will just welcome all participants who have any question or doubt about it. If you have any query, please feel free to ask. If not, then also okay. So it's like the presentation really went well.
Yeah, I was actually a little bit worried that I may have rushed through a few important topics or may have used a language that may not be understood. And because I'm
No,
from India, maybe my accent could not be understood.
it was good. Actually, it is good. So there is one question from Dean. How long can the machine run before servicing?
Okay, so this actually hugely depends on the breathing back because that is the limiting factor here. The manual resuscitators are usually not used for a longer duration. From my understanding, it can be used to maximum about a week, which is also something that needs to be regularly checked into. And if you look into the MIT's event website, they also claim that the any breather bag based ventilator would can only work for 5 to 6 hours. So that is their claim.
Okay. Yeah, so I think no questions in the chat. So, okay, so there is another question from Dean. Is this run with battery backup?
So we had not incorporated a battery backup uh, till now. We So our understanding was that a UPS, an uninterrupted power supply, can also be used as a battery backup for it. And we had actually calculated how much time the ventilator will work when using a UPS. So if I remember correctly, it was 1.5 hours that the ventilator will run under a UPS. This is a 12-volt DC system, yes. Except the motor. The motor requires 24 volts.